What if the best shoes you could have for running are not shoes, but instead are sandals? Why do I say that? Well, let me answer in a kind of roundabout way. Let's think about human history. People have been running happily, successfully, enjoyably, pain-free, injury-free in sandals for thousands of years. As far as we can tell, maybe 10,000 years plus. And if you think about shoes, prior to the invention of the modern running shoe, people were running in things that were practically sandals, really thin sole, really thin upper, without any problem. Now, some people might say to me, Stephen, that's the naturalistic fallacy. What you're saying is that's the way people did it in nature or with very minimal intervention. But that doesn't mean it's better for you. Maybe someone invented something good for you with modern technology. Well, that's a really good question. So if we're going to assume that a modern running shoe, something that looks like this, is better than sandals or being in bare feet because of modern technology, well, we should be able to prove that. Where's the evidence? Well, if you start looking, you will find that there is none. You will find there is no evidence that the modern running shoe improves performance and reduces injuries compared to what people were doing for hundreds and thousands of years prior to that. 50% of runners and 80% of marathoners get injured every year, even after they started using these shoes. And if you look at what running shoe companies do, every 6 months, here's a brand new technology that's going to improve your running and reduce your injuries. And yet, they never seem to land on one that works. Think about it this way. The running shoe industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry every year just in America alone. If you could develop a shoe that reliably and demonstrably reduced injuries and improved performance, that's worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. These big shoe companies have a lot of incentive to do that. Why haven't they? They've got reason to. They've got all this research and scientists behind them. Why haven't they done it? My argument is because they're barking up the wrong tree. The basic idea behind what this thing does is faulty to begin with, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But let's just back up to why sandals. Couldn't be simpler. A running sandal is everything you need and nothing more. I mean, if you think about what you need, why you have a shoe, the most important reasons are to protect your feet and to hold that protection on your foot. That's it. So let's take a look at some running sandals and you'll see what I mean. This is a Tarahumara Huarache. This is their running shoe. It is a sandal made out of a piece of used tire, some leather glued onto that, and a leather strap that you wrap around your ankle. That's it. Protection and something that holds that protection on your foot. A little bit of comfort with the leather on the top. That's all you need. So here's a pair of Zero shoes. Similar idea. This is our Amuri Venture. Really thin sole, really flexible, lets your foot move naturally. We'll come back to that in a second. And just enough to hold it on your foot. Can you actually run in this? Yes. We have thousands and thousands of people running everything from, casual 5Ks to ultramarathon. In fact, if you look at that couple right there, that's John and Mel Sinclair at the end of a 50-mile race when they were wearing just a pair of these. Now you might look and say, well, wait, you said protection, and that does not look like much protection. You're right, it's not. Now, they run trail marathons, so you don't need as much protection as you think if you're paying attention to what you're doing with your feet. But if you want some more protection, we've got that as well. So this is our Umara Z Trail sandal, really trail friendly, similar, I won't talk about sports sandals, but what we've done here is the Field True rubber that we use on our Venture, and then trail foam to even out the bumps, and bare foam to add a little comfort. But again, look at how simple it is. It's just something to protect your foot and something to hold it on your foot. The Z pattern webbing here is just very secure, but don't be fooled. This simple 3-point design, that's enough to hold on your foot for ultramarathons. The Tarahumara run hundreds and hundreds of miles in a pair of huaraches just like this, same 3-point design. Another reason to think about running in sandals is we would argue that when you run in sandals compared to traditional running shoes, you can improve your running. You can get better. And maybe you can get healthier and get rid of injuries. Since I don't have science to back it up, I'm not going to make medical claims. I'm not going to try and be stupid. We'll talk about that later. But let's just say, if you think about it logically, let's talk about science. So Back in 2009, Daniel Lieberman from Harvard did some research that showed that when you're in a pair of running shoes, what you will typically do because of this big thick padding around the heel is land on your heel with your foot out in front of your body and a straight leg. And what that does is every time you land, you're applying braking forces, literally like hitting the brakes on your car, and those forces go in what he calls an impact transient force spike, a very rapid, very extreme amount of force that goes straight through your heel and through your joints, through your ankle, your knee, your hip, your back, all the way up to your head. If you take off those shoes, if you have something that's just, nothing on your foot, then what happens is that force goes away. And the reason that it goes away is you stop landing with your foot out in front of you and applying braking forces because that hurts. And what you do instead is get your foot underneath you more, and you land typically midfoot or flat-footed, or sometimes, on the forefoot, and then let your heel drop down as your arch works naturally. And you use your muscles, your ligaments, and your tendons as the springs and shock absorbers that they are meant to be. So let's back up and talk about heels for a second. If you look at this big, thick heel, when you land on that, what does that do? Well, the first running shoe just lifted up the heel, just had padding under the heel. Let's look at heels. This is your foot if you got rid of all the stuff other than the bones. What shape is that? It's a ball. Have you ever tried sitting on one of those fit balls? It's hard to balance because you don't have any way of really stabilizing that from above. It's the same thing here. You don't have anything stabilizing your heel from above when you're just landing on your heel. And so what running shoe companies did next is they had to add pronation control and supination control and motion control to prevent the thing that they caused. When you're not using those, if you're using a pair of sandals, there's no elevated heel, there's no extra padding, and as a result, there's no need for all of that control and similarly support. So when you land on your heel, your foot is essentially landing and it gets stretched out so that by the time it hits the ground, it's all stretched out. That puts a huge amount of strain on your plantar fascia. So the next thing people started developing was arch support. Because your arch wasn't being used, it was being flattened out. What? So now you're supporting this thing. Okay, let's talk about support really quickly. If you put your arm in a cast, what happens to it over time? It does not get stronger, it gets weaker. If you put your foot in a cast, it does not get stronger over time, it gets weaker. If you do this long enough, you will know why we refer to these as foot coffins. You're making your feet progressively weaker and weaker and weaker. If you're running in a pair of sandals where your foot bends and flexes naturally, you can actually use the muscles, ligaments, and tendons the way they're designed. If they've been asleep, they can strengthen. Am I saying you're going to strengthen your feet? Again, no, we don't have some specific bit of science that goes along with that, but think about it logically. Here's this thing that does not let your foot bend. It's like being in a cast. Here's this thing that lets your foot do whatever it wants because there's nothing getting in the way. Which do you think might let your foot work more naturally, and if you're doing things that require foot strength, might be helpful? That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, so why else might you like to run in a pair of sandals instead of running shoes? The freedom. Oh my gosh. All you need is this little bit holding something on your foot, a little protection, a little bit to hold it on. When you feel the lightness and the freedom that you get because of the air that's moving around your foot and because there's nothing on top of your foot, your toes can flex without having anything in the way. Just that little bit of fabric, when you feel that on your toes, for many people, it will restrict your movement because your body goes, oops, something in the way, better not do that. There's nothing restricting your movement in a pair of sandals. The fit. I don't know about you, but that is not the shape of my foot. Not even close, in fact. And even this is a minimalist shoe. While the forefoot is closer to the shape of my foot, this midfoot area, my foot is not that thin here. And again, I don't need that support. I literally can't get these on my feet. So you don't have that issue with sandals because we make them wide enough to allow your foot to fit properly. And in fact, with our, where did I put it? With our venture sandal or our do-it-yourself kits, where you can make your own sandals the way people have been doing it for thousands of years, you can trim these to fit your unique foot shape. So you get something that fits your foot, not something that squeezes your toes together into a giant point. Whose foot is pointy like that? I don't get that. Anyway, Really quick aside though, don't confuse barefoot shoes with sandals or even with, with anything really, or with bare feet. So there was a study that came out that showed that most barefoot shoes, people don't make those form changes that I talked about earlier, mostly because there's still enough padding and enough protection, too much, that they can't feel the ground. They can't feel what's happening if they're doing it incorrectly. If they've been running incorrectly up till now, there's no feedback that says, hey, you might want to try something a little different. So just be careful. What happened in 2009, 2010, as the idea of barefoot running became more popular, mostly because of the success of this book, Born to Run, the running shoe companies started adopting these terms like barefoot shoes to claim that you were going to get the same benefit in their product that you would if you were barefoot. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. Now, again, think about this. This is one of our sandal bases. When you're running in this kind of a sandal, it's like you're being barefoot, but right before your foot hits the ground, someone just throws a piece of rubber on the ground underneath you. There's nothing getting in the way. And if you look, the Running Clinic, I can link to it, they did a study on barefoot, how close to barefoot something actually is, and they found our sandals are the closest thing to barefoot you're going to get in something you could actually run, walk, hike, and do pretty much everything you want in. In fact, just because a shoe looks like feet, like those Vibram five-finger shoes, doesn't mean they act like feet. Frankly, if those things had fit my feet, I have Morton's toe, my second toe is longer. If they had fit my feet, I probably would have never started Xero shoes. But because they didn't fit my feet, I started looking for alternatives and started making barefoot-inspired sandals. That's how that all began. And speaking of those particular products, or any shoe, something else you don't get with sandals, smell or marital problems. We know people who have practically gotten divorced over the smell of their spouse's five fingers or running shoes. When you have your foot encased in something that can get moist and dark and hot, that's where bacteria grow. That leads to odor and other problems as well. So in a pair of sandals where your feet are free, you don't have that issue. And now, backing up really quick, you don't need to run in a pair of sandals. You don't need to use a sandal for running. You can use them for anything. You can use them for recovery. If you run in a pair of these, which, I don't know if I pointed this out. So this is a barefoot shoe. Flexible here, totally stiff through here. And again, doesn't really fit. So again, don't confuse barefoot shoes with sandals, which give you a whole different set of performance characteristics. But backing up, if you want to use a pair of sandals just for recovery, you can. Run in a pair of these and then recover in those. But then you might want to ask yourself, why am I having to recover? What I can tell you is, again, if you use your feet naturally, you will probably find that you eliminate the need to recover. Now, you'll get some authentic muscle soreness, and I mean, if you're running properly, you're not going to get unnecessary soreness. You don't need to have ankle soreness or calf soreness or Achilles soreness, but you could feel at the end of a long run that you have well used your feet. That's one thing, but not the kind of thing where you feel like you need recovery, where you can't move and you just need something to get you from place to place. Backing up to John and Mel as an example. They did a 256-kilometer, 7-day stage race across Madagascar in a pair of these. And at the end of the race, all the people who were in shoes, they'd been going through water and out of water, they were wearing socks or taking off their socks, and everyone else, their feet were mangled. Skin was coming off, nails were coming off. They were totally fine. No need to recovery. No need for recovery. No need to recover. So, but again, if you don't want to run in a pair of sandals, totally fine. Use them for taking a walk or going for a hike or just enjoying how it feels. Feel the freedom. Feel the fun. Feel the world. Give it a try.